Welcome, everyone, and mahalo for joining us this evening. The Faith Action for Community Equity's Transformative Justice Task Force is hosting this gathering. For the past few months, our task force, in partnership with many others, have been listening, learning, educating ourselves and others, engaging with folks who have been directly impacted by the criminal legal system, as well as folks who have the power to make laws reforming cash bail that can transform our criminal legal system and our communities. So a week from today is the start of the 2022 Hawaii State Legislative Session, and we are thrilled to have this opportunity to learn how to better engage in the process and work towards seeing cash bail reform successfully enacted into law. We would like to introduce Virginia Beck of the Public Access Room, who will make the presentation, build to law, and answer questions afterwards. Now, Virginia is the coordinator of the State Capitol's Public Access Room, otherwise known as PAR, and it is a division of the Nonpartisan Legislative Reference Bureau. Virginia has served in her position since 2015 and has additional experience with a variety of government, educational, and nonprofit organizations, as well as a master's degree in public administration. And we are so honored to have you with us this evening, Virginia. Thank you. And before you get started, I want to turn it over to Soon, and she's going to give us some Zoom housekeeping. Thanks, Soon.
Some Zoom housekeeping. Please keep your microphones muted until the Q&A after Virginia's presentation. If you have questions that come up during the presentation, please be sure to include them in the chat, and we'll be more than happy to get to them. Then you'll have the opportunity to ask questions after the presentation by raising your electronic virtual hand, which can be found in the reactions at the bottom. Just click raise hand, and we will call on you as we see hands raised, and then you may unmute yourself. You may also type questions in the chat if that's better than actually saying it with your camera on or mic on. And for those of you who are live streaming on Facebook, questions can be included in the comments under that video as well. If your question doesn't get answered or you think of something after this evening or during the legislative session, please reach out to Virginia by phone or email, and she is extremely responsive at PAR, P-A-R for Public Access Room, at capitol.hawaii.gov. And now, without further ado, Virginia.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me here tonight. So I've been asked to talk about how a bill becomes a law, and we'll be talking about how you can add your voice along the way. And let me go ahead and share my screen. There we go. So bill to law process. Here's a picture of what a bill to law looks like. It can be a little confusing. We've got a House bill going this direction, going down through the House, crossing over and going through the Senate. We've got a Senate bills at the same time going down through the Senate, crossing over and going down through the House. Then we get into this complicated part and then off to the governor. So we're going to try to make this a little bit more understandable. The thing I want you to know is that you'll see these colored ovals, the first, second, and third reading in the House and in the Senate. That's the part that's actually required by the Constitution. The hearings that happen when we've got the committees are a part of the process, but they're not required by the Constitution. It's kind of interesting. So a bill has to go through all of the committees that it gets referred to, and it's got to go in through them in the order that they're presented. And it could be just one committee, two committees, three committees, two meeting together, all kinds of combinations. And the reason we've got the ear up here is because that's the part where they have committee hearings, where the public can offer testimony on whether you like the idea or not that's presented in the bill. At the same time that it's going through the committee hearings, it's going to go for those 3 votes on the floor of the full chamber. So all 51 members voting on the bill of the House of Representatives and all 25 members of the Senate voting on the bill. So once it gets through the House and the Senate, we have to make sure that they agree on the exact wording of the bill that then goes off to the governor, who either signs it into law, allows it to become law without signature, or if the governor vetoes the bill, there's mechanisms for them for the legislature to override the veto. So that's a lot that has to happen. And it's all got to happen by the deadlines. And you'll get to know the deadlines very well if you're advocating at the state capitol. So one of the first ways you can add your voice is to actually share an idea for a new law. And I'm sure some of you have done this when you're talking about cash bail or monetary bail. It has to be, the bill has to be introduced by a representative or a senator. And if that bill is successful, it will become an act of law. And you don't need to worry about writing the bill. All you need to do is give bullet points, for example, of what you'd like the law to do. Maybe there are other states that have similar laws in place. Maybe there is a website with lots of statistics. So we're going to have an imaginary bill. Cash bail creates barriers. Let's remove the cash bail in certain situations. And we would, write out a little bit more about that and find a legislator who likes that idea. We would probably start with our own, or in this case, maybe the chair of the Judiciary Committee. If we could get the chair of the Judiciary Committee, either in the House or in the Senate, on board, we'd be one step ahead. And you could certainly call the public access room and see if we could help you find out who's supported similar issues in the past. So we find a representative who likes our idea. We're going to pretend we've got a House bill. He agrees to introduce the bill. Now, sometimes, unfortunately, sometimes it's hard to get a peek at what the draft bill actually looks like. I know it's crazy, but the paper around here, sometimes it's just hard to get your hands on that draft until it's actually introduced. It's very common for a representative to find a senator to introduce identical legislation in the other chamber. Those are called companion bills. And the idea is that if one of them gets stalled, say I've got a Senate bill and it gets stalled, well, then my House bill might be able to go all the way through. And then by the time I come over to the Senate, we've resolved the problem in a way we can go. So it's supposed to increase the odds of getting the bill through. So as Lee mentioned, we're going to start up on January 19th, that's next Wednesday, and we'll go for 60 session days, or 60 days where they're actually convened in session. And that takes us to Cinco de Mayo, which is going to be the last day of session this year. It's easy to remember. And if we look at the session calendar, you can find, if you haven't gotten a copy of the session calendar yet, you can find it on the Public Access Room website or on the capitol.hawaii.gov website. In the upper left-hand corner, there'll be a link to the calendar. And you'll see that the bill introduction cutoff is the week after opening day. So by January 26th, all of the bills that are going to be considered are going to be in the hopper, okay? So that's when we can really make sure that we know what bills that you're interested in are in there. I didn't say that right, but you know what I'm saying. So the legislator will actually turn to the different research agencies here in the building who will actually do the bill drafting. And as the bill title, this one is relating to criminal pretrial reform, that bill title never changes. And it's important because it must reflect the contents of the bill. The bill can change, but that title's got to stay the same. If there's going to be a purpose section, it'll be right up front in the first section of the bill. Then it'll get into the guts, perhaps changing the Hawaii revised statutes, the codified law in Hawaii. And then at the very end will be the date that the law will take effect if it's enacted. And as soon as a bill is introduced, it gets a bill number. And this part of the bill number is going to stay with it throughout its time at the legislature. So you can always tell whether it was born by a representative or a senator, by whether it's a House bill or an SB, a Senate bill. And so say we got introduced. The first reading, the first vote, and we're going to pretend this is a House bill, the first vote from the 51 members, no big deal at all. Everything passes first reading. I've never seen anything not pass first reading. It's almost as a courtesy that if you think this is important enough to put it in the hopper, let's get this thing going. So what we'll be waiting for, once we find, the first thing we'll do is try to find all of the bills that we're interested in regard to cash bail. So it might be our bill, but there might be other legislators who've introduced other bills that could be similar or at least on the same subject that we want to keep our eyes on. So then we'll be looking to see what committees our bill has to go through. And we're going to pretend that our House bill gets referred to Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs, and then on to Finance. So we know what we've got to do. We've got a double referral because it's got two different stops. And we know that we need to worry about the first lateral deadline. So we've got to get out of that Judiciary Committee by the first lateral deadline, which comes in mid-February. So the deadlines really do drive things. And if you've got a triple referral, you have to act right away because that comes so quickly after the bill introduction deadline. And the Public Access Room has on our website a handout, a little chart that shows you, depending on how many referrals your bill got, which deadlines you need to worry about. It's called Which Deadlines Apply to My Bill, original title. So what we want to do once we find out what committees we've got to go through, if we want the bill to go forward, we want to ask for a committee hearing. And we want to move quickly because committees don't meet every day of the week necessarily. Some of them only meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Some meet Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. Some meet every day. But they've got to give the public 48 hours notice of a hearing. In the Senate, the first one has to give 72 hours notice of a hearing. So we'll want to make sure that we still make that deadline. And the person with the power in our system is the committee chair. So the chairs in the Hawaii State Legislature have a lot of power. They're the ones who decide which bills are going to be heard. Because if it doesn't get heard, what's going to happen is that lateral deadline is going to come and that lateral deadline is going to go and we're going to be stuck in the JHA committee. So one of the things you'll want to do is sign into the legislature's website. You can register there for an account. It's very easy. They just want your email address and your name, and you make up a password. You sign in and click on hearing notification to make sure that you receive an email anytime the bill that you're interested in comes up for a hearing. And you may also want, if I were following this issue, for example, I would also sign up for the committees the Judiciary Committee in the Senate and the Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs Committee in the House, so that anytime they have a hearing, I get emailed the hearing notice. I can then look through the hearing notice to see what other bills I might be interested in. Maybe there are other bills that touch on this issue that might give you the opportunity to testify. And if your bill does get scheduled for a public hearing, you'll want to testify. And time is always short. Just know that going in. You're not going to be able to have, the most eloquent piece of testimony ever. Just do the best you can. They want the testimony in 24 hours prior to the hearing. And sometimes they're strict with that deadline. If you miss the deadline, try to do it anyway. If you run into a problem, try reaching out to the committee clerk, and we can help you with all of that. And don't forget to get other people to testify as well. You can always send them to the public access room, and we'll be happy to give them the walking steps. So to submit written testimony, you just sign into the website, click on testimony, and you can type in your testimony in the form or attach a piece of written testimony. And you can also indicate that you want to also Zoom testify, so to offer oral testimony. And I would encourage you to do that, even if you don't have that much to say. I was talking to Lee prior to the presentation and talking about when the building has been open to the public, it really has an impact when the hearing room is full of people who are supporting a piece of legislation. In much the same way, you could sign up for oral testimony. It's fine to say, I'm just going to stand on my written testimony. I don't have anything to add, but I am in strong support of this legislation. That's fine. And they'll know that one more person cares enough to come. And I would practice a 1 or 2 minute presentation, because sometimes they have deadline, they have time constraints on how long the hearings can go because of this Zoom business. So more and more they seem to be having time limits. So after all the testimony's been heard, the committee could do a couple of different things. They could pass the bill without any changes, or they could pass the bill with changes, amended. Or they could just say, we're not going to vote. We're going to just hold the bill. And if they do that, then your bill is probably going to die in committee, because that deadline's going to come and the deadline's going to go, and your bill is going to be in the committee. Now, 2 things about this slide. One thing is, who gets to decide which path to go down? The answer to that is the committee chair. That chair, once again, has that power. And on whether or not there's going to be a vote and what they're going to vote on. The other thing you'll notice is there's not an option here of vote to not pass the bill, because that so rarely happens. If they think it's going to die, if the vote's not going to pass, they'll just avoid the vote altogether. And you'll see that throughout the legislature, that if they think it's going to be a no vote, they'll usually avoid the vote rather than have a negative vote. Just the way they do things, very polite about the way they kill bills here. So changes could be just technical changes, or they could be significant. Got to comply with that title. In our example, the Judiciary Hawaiian Affairs Committees decides they're going to change the purpose section a little bit. They want to add some things and whatnot. It does note here on this slide that if there was an appropriation amount, it probably would get zeroed out right away and then be added in at the very end of session. It's just the way they do things here. They would keep the dollar amount in the committee report that accompanies the legislation, but they would keep the legislation blank for a while. And then they made technical changes. So they made changes to the bill. So it's still HB 1243. That part of the bill number never changes, but now it's House Draft 1. This is the first time the House is changing the bill. And So every time the bill moves forward out of committee, it's going to be accompanied by a committee report. And that is going to summarize the changes that were made in the bill. And that's really helpful. If you've been at a committee hearing or watching a committee hearing and they say, you know, we're going to vote and we're going to change the purpose section and we're going to do technical changes, you have to sometimes wait a few days before you actually get to see the end result of those changes. And then you'll see the changes summarized in the committee report. So they go ahead and do that. They vote to pass with changes, put together a committee report, and the committee report specifies that they ask that the bill be scheduled for the second reading, the second vote on the floor of the House, and then forwarded to Finance. So yay, we're making progress. So second reading usually takes place right after the first committee. And I just want to show you what this looks like on the bill status sheet. So I'm hoping that you're familiar with the status sheets that appear for each bill on the state legislature's website. Basically, everything that ever happens to the bill gets registered. And so please ignore the names here because they're not corresponding to the committee. But it's just to show you the committee passed with amendments on the 4th of February. And then you'll notice it's not reported out until the 11th of February. So we had to wait a week before we saw the amended version of the bill. And then it went for second reading on the floor and got referred to Finance. So we get to do it all over again. We get to ask for a public hearing from the Finance Committee, go to the chair. The chair is the person who has the power. Now, Finance has tons and tons of bills. So you really want to make, you know, this is where you can ask other people to chime in as well to try to get your bill to be one of the ones that they hear. And they're going to have to hear it in time to meet the first decking deadline, which this year comes March 4th. Easy deadline to remember, March 4th. It's a directive. If your bill does get scheduled for a public hearing, of course, you'll testify. And don't count on them having read your previous testimony. Sometimes people come to me and they think that happens. It doesn't, you know, I wouldn't count on that happening. I would address the committee as though they've not heard from you before. And you may even use exactly the same testimony, just with different, you know, if the bill is changed substantially, of course, you'll want to change your testimony and make it changed accordingly. So again, the committee has the options of what to do, pass it with or without changes, or not vote. And sometimes they don't make the decision right at the end of the hearing. I want to just point that out. Sometimes they'll say, we're going to hold this bill or defer it until Monday at 2 o'clock, and then we'll make decision making at that time. So that happens quite often. So Finance decides they're going to pass it with changes as well. And they do this thing where they change the effective date at the end of the bill to January 1, 2099. Craziness. Don't worry. It doesn't mean that they have any intention of it going off to the governor like this. What they're doing is making sure that the bill will go to conference at the end of session, where the chairs will have the opportunity to look at the bill again and possibly negotiate changes. So now our bill, HB 1243, is House Draft 2. And the committee report summarizes the changes and asks that it pass third reading. And the Constitution says before the House or Senate is asked to vote on a bill for the third time on the floor, they have to be given 48 hours notice. So one of the things that appears on this bill status sheet is this 48 hours notice thing that says, in this case, Tuesday, March 9th. What that means is that's when the members are going to vote on the bill. So they've got to have a couple days with the bill in the form that they're being asked to vote on. And if you think there's any chance that this bill is going to get caught up, you may want to just bring it to the attention of the members and let them know that it's important to you. Make sure you contact your own representative. If there's a representative that you've heard is on the fence, you may want to find constituents of that representative to contact the rep's office. And third reading has to happen before the first crossover deadline, which is March 10th this year. Then it gets to go through the same process in the other chamber. So we've gone down this side of the thing. We've got introduced, first reading, referred to committees, committee hearing, second reading, committee hearing, third reading. Now we cross over to the Senate and we get to go through this whole same song and dance. And the Senate has different committees. First reading, again, is no big deal. Everything passes it. And then we wait to find out what committees we need to go through. And this is probably not a very realistic one, but I just wanted to point out that sometimes bills can be referred to a joint committee. So in this case, Judiciary meeting with Public Safety, Intergovernmental, and Military Affairs, and then on to the Ways and Means Committee. Still considered a double referral because it just has two stops. It's going to do those two committees together and then Ways and Means. And deadlines come up fast, especially after crossover. Now, crossover, only about 25% of the bills will make it to first crossover. So there'll be, say, 2,000 bills introduced, and what would that be? 500 bills actually make it to first crossover. So they have fewer bills to have to sift through, but those deadlines come up quickly. And the deadlines are called the second in the latter part of session because you're in the non-originating chamber, they call it. Our bill would be in the Senate, which is not where it originated. And we would follow the second lateral and second decking deadlines. When you have a joint referral, the lead committee is usually who you want to advocate to please get that scheduled for a hearing. They're the ones, the committee clerk will be the one trying to find a time that both committees can meet. They're going to vote separately, but they're going to report it out together if it passes. Occasionally, you will see joint referrals where one committee does one thing, the other committee does another, and thus the bill dies. But it doesn't happen that often. Usually they go along with each other. And then you get to testify again. And once again, don't think that they've already read your testimony. Go ahead and submit new testimony. And I would really consider signing up to speak because it really does have an impact. And in the Senate, only one committee has to have a hearing. The other committees that the bill is referred to can choose to just have public decision makings where they accept written testimony only and not oral testimony. So this would be your last chance, perhaps, of offering oral testimony. So they have the choices again of whether to pass the bill with or without changes or hold the bill. And in this case, they decide we're going to pass the bill with changes. Now it's a Senate draft one. And we're going to change the list of violations and offenses covered. And they report it out to meet the deadline. And you'll see what it looks like on the bill status page. They scheduled a public hearing, and then you'll have each committee showing that they passed with amendments, and then at a later date reported from them jointly with recommendation to go on to WHAM. So second reading, second time to get together with the 25 members of the Senate to vote on the bill now in the changed form. And off we go to WHAM. WHAM, like finance, gets a lot of bills. So we'll really want to speak up and make sure that they know that this is an important one to schedule for a hearing or decision making. And in our case, they decide on a decision-making meeting. So all we can do is offer our written testimony, no chance to offer oral testimony. And they decide, you know, the bill looks just fine to us. We're going to pass it without any changes. And they report it out in time to make the second decking deadline, April 8th this year. I think it was April 9th last year. And you'll see how that looks there. Now, here, in this case, the Ways and Means Committee passed the bill without changes. So the members on the floor of the Senate have already seen HB 1243 SD1. They saw that when they voted on it for second reading. So they've already got 48 hours notice. So as a courtesy, the clerk just puts on the bill status page 1 day notice, letting you know the next legislative day they're going to be voting on the bill. And that has to happen before the second crossover deadline. And then we go back to the originating chamber. So the Senate sends the bill back to the House. It passed all 3 readings, went through the committees. The House gets the bill and says, well, it's an SD1. That means you've changed it. We disagree with the changes. And then we go into conference. Now, they do have the option of agreeing to the changes. But in our case, the bill still has a bad effective date on it. So it wouldn't make sense to agree to the changes because it's not in the form to go off to the governor. So it prompts the conference process. And you'll see listed here how it looks on the bill status page with the disagreement, the conferees appointed, that kind of thing. So conference can be a little opaque to the public. It's the meetings are open to the public and you can watch them, but there's not an opportunity for testimony. So instead, you just advocate to the members. So what happens is that Senate leadership is going to appoint members to the conference committee on this bill. House leadership appoints members to a conference committee on this bill. And those committees then meet and try to come up with the final version of the bill that will then be presented for final reading to both chambers. Now, the bills can still die here. And we saw that last year with one of the monetary bail bills. Made it all the way to the conference committee, They even had conferees named for the House and the Senate, but then they failed to meet. So the bill died right there. Very, very hard thing to take when you've made it all the way through the House and the Senate to have a bill die in conference, but it does happen. They've got to come up with their final agreement by the decking deadline. Let's see, the only thing I want to mention here is if it's got a money referral, they are going to need to get the okay from the money committees before it can be reported out of conference. And and it will be the one of the fiscal bills deadline, which is a day later than the non-monetary bills. Let's see. Yep, I think that's all I've covered. There will be rules that are set up about how many make a quorum, that kind of thing. You'll be advocating by reaching out to conferees, but I would say reach out to everyone, because at this stage of the game, what happens to your bill could be affected by what's going on with another bill that has nothing to do with it, but there's some talk of, I need your support here, you need my support there. So you just never know. It's worth trying to talk to everyone, to just let them know how important it is and how you want the bill to emerge. So the bill could come out of conference with a new version, which is what we would hope for our bill, because it's got a bad effective date, so we want to make a change there, at least that change. And otherwise, what could happen is the House members could say, you know what, we agree to the Senate changes and we're going to bring it back to our chamber and vote on it, so they can change their mind on that disagreement. Or it could die without agreement by the deadline. So our bill, CD1, which actually, when you see it on the status page, it's going to be HB 1243, HD2, SD1, CD1, but that makes us tired to say, so we just abbreviate it with the last draft number and just call it CD1 version of HB 1243. So they change it to have a good effective date. They change it so that it still incorporates the House's change on the purpose section and the Senate's change on the violations and offenses covered. They issue a joint committee report, recommend scheduling for final reading, and they get it out of there by the final decking deadline. And the final decking deadline is one where they have a certain time period during the day that they've got to get all of their votes done, and then they've got to get their committee report filed, and then they've got to get the bill filed. Sometimes it can go into the evening hours. And then we've got to give the members notice that, hey, there's a new version of this bill, and we want to make sure that every legislator has had the opportunity to vote on this version of the bill, because if it passes, it's going to go off to the governor. So they give 48 hours notice that they're going to be voting on it, and it comes up for final reading. So it'll be presented in the House and it'll be presented in the Senate, and it has to pass in both of them. And it has to do that by the end of session. And then you're still not done. Then the House is going to transmit, in our case, it's the House, is going to transmit the bill after they've received notice that it's passed in the Senate and they know it's passed in the House. They'll transmit it to the governor. And then, so we've made it through the House, made it through the Senate, made it through the conference process. So now we're down to the governor. And the governor can either sign the bill into law, or he can wait until a certain date, and if he doesn't sign it or veto it, it'll become law without signature. Or he could veto the bill, say, nope, I don't want this to become law. And these deadlines take us into July. So I think it's July 12th that'll be the day by which we know all of the bills that have become law. And I do want to note that vetoed bills can become law. We saw this last session, quite a few vetoes, and some of them were overridden by a vote of 2/3 in the House and 2/3 in the Senate. And some of them were actually changed by the legislature to be fixed in the way the governor wanted them fixed, and then the governor signed them into law. So that can still happen. If you made it through, our bill gets signed, we'd be ecstatic, fireworks, the whole thing. It would be amazing. It takes a while usually to change laws in the state of Hawaii. About 90% of them don't become law. And so we encourage you not to give up, to get ready for the next year's session. And it's actually a 2-year cycle. So last year was an odd numbered year after the election. So we started afresh with House Bill 123 and Senate Bill 123, and away we went. And then what happened is any bill that didn't pass out of the legislature, like our monetary bail bill that made it all the way to conference, gets carried over to the 2022 session. And it's right where it used to be. So it doesn't have to worry about all of the first deadlines. It just needs to worry about that final decking deadline this year. They could revitalize it right where it is. Most of the carryover bills, that's what we call those bills, nothing happens to them. They just sit there. It's very common, even if a bill's made it all the way to conference, to start the second year session with a brand new bill, even if it's pretty much identical to the old one, just because to get the momentum going again. So I'm not sure how things will work out this year. And then at the end of 2022, everything that hasn't passed is going to be dead because we're going to have elections. We're going to have new legislators come on board. And then in 2023, they're going to start afresh, a new 2-year cycle. This is the bill that I was talking about earlier, the SB 1260 that made it all the way to conference last year. And I just wanted to show you, this is what the bill status page for that bill looks like. And we can look at everything that happened to the bill. And we can see it was introduced, passed first reading. It got a single referral, only had to go through the Senate Judiciary Committee. It got passed with changes. What they did is they defected the effective date. That means they made it something crazy like 30/21 or something like that. And they reported it out, passed second reading. They had a 48 hours notice that they were going to pass it for third reading. House got the bill from the Senate, passed first reading, got a double referral, Judiciary, Hawaiian Affairs, and Finance. Judiciary, Hawaiian Affairs passed it with changes. They had a lot of changes to make. So they amended a lot of things. And recommended it pass on second reading. Then it got referred to Finance. Finance says we're going to pass it without changes. And then it gets reported from Finance, goes for third reading, received from House. Senate disagrees. Senate conferees, House conferees, they both received notice that the other one is all set, and then failed to meet. So they just didn't get it out of there by the decking deadline. Now, why they didn't meet, I don't know. You'd probably want to talk to the chairs of the conference committees. And you don't need to remember all of this about how a bill becomes a law, because the public access room was created by the legislature just to help you participate. So please don't be a stranger. Give us a call or an email. Our website is lrb.hawaii.gov/PAR. And if you go to the Learn tab, you can find workshops there. You can also go to our YouTube page. There are workshops there if you want to watch them. Under Engage, there's a page called Engagement 101. And that's got the instructions on how to offer testimony, how to sign up for hearing notices, how to set up a tracking list, all kinds of things. No known cure for the advocacy virus. You guys have obviously gotten it. Treatment is available by participating in your democracy, and you're always welcome in the public access room. So there's one last version of how a bill becomes a law that I just want to share with you. And we're going to pretend that I want a double-decker tree swing. Okay, they decide it's going to be changed in committee to be a double wide. I guess I can live with that. As amended on second reading, they decide to change it while it's on the floor. That's kind of a crazy looking situation. As it's enacted, they put up braces, they've dissected the tree. I guess that'll work. Unfortunately, they didn't have any appropriation in the bill. The Ways and Means and Finance Committee didn't give them any money. So as implemented by the state agency, they said, well, all we can afford is this useless thing lying on the ground. As reported by the media, they've actually gotten it kind of upside down. As understood by the public, they don't even know we're talking about tree swings. And what was actually needed was a tire swing. So this is to do a couple of things. One is to try to remind you to keep your sense of humor because it'll help to keep you sane. The other is not to be too wed to your initial vision. If I thought the double-decker tree swing was the only answer, I'd be blind to a much better solution. So here's our contact information, and I believe it'll be shared with you. I can also put it in the chat. Our YouTube page, as I mentioned, has lots of videos on it. Follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. We're not on Instagram yet. We're just a little behind the times, but that's where we are right now. So that's all I've got. I don't know. I guess I can stop my sharing and answer any questions, and we can go live on the websites if we need to.
Thank you so much, Virginia. That was
welcome.
amazing. And thank you for customizing it for us.
Sure.
Much appreciated. I see Reverend Kyle has a question in the chat. Kyle, do you want to put your mic on and ask it, or did you want us to read it?
However you want to deal with it. I am happy to read it.
Please.
Virginia, I understood you to say that the bill, using your example, the bill from last session got stuck because the conference committee never met. Can the same conferees who were assigned to it just meet and it continues from right there?
They could, but sometimes at the start of session, they discharge the conferees so that they can't meet right away. They could always name conferees later when they get to the conference part of the process again. So it's definitely, if they don't pick it up right away at the start of session, it is something that's just waiting.
So while bills could be picked up from last session, they actually don't get picked up wherever they stopped. It's really all new things?
Well, no, it can happen either way. So I wish I could predict for you whether, you know, I don't know. I would ask, you know, personally, I would probably go ask Senator Rhodes what he knows about the situation and what he thinks will happen, whether that bill is going to be used as the vehicle or whether they're going to use another bill to focus discussion during the session. And I don't know if there were, how do I put this? So I'm not privy to why they didn't meet. You know, were they really far away from each other on this? And so that they didn't feel like it was going to do any good? I just don't know whether, and if they were far away from each other or had a lot of questions still in their mind about the reform, then it might benefit from starting over with a new bill to actually come through, have testimony, and really work out the fine details of the measure. How's that for a non-answer? Okay, any other questions, or did you want me to go online and show you anything, or you're all good to go? just please don't hesitate to call or email us in the public access room. We really do like our jobs here, and we love helping people. So, and I think we can help to make things a little bit smoother. So if you find yourself getting frustrated at any stage of the way, whether you're not understanding what's going on, whether you can't find something on the website, whatever, call the public access room and we'll be happy to try to help.
And Virginia, I think Esther raised her hand and she may have had a
Oh,
question.
yes, I'm
Esther?
sorry.
Yeah, my question was also about that committee that it got all the way there and then didn't get, it got stuck in the final committee. Is it, what was a situation that committee had a lot of bills that they were looking at and they all got stuck? Or was that committee just our bill?
That committee, the conference committee, is just on your bill.
Okay.
Now, the chairs of the judiciary committees have a lot of other bills that they're doing conference on that may have gone through. But yeah, no, it's just your bill that they're focused on.
I was wondering whether the problem was that they had so many things to consider, they didn't get around to it, or
That
was the problem that the bill really needs to be changed, in which case we'd want it to start over. But if they just didn't get around to it, it seems as though we'd like to try to get them to.
Right, right. Well, that's the big question. And that's where you could be talking to people now to find out what the idea is. I don't know. I don't know what their reasons were. So sometimes it's a little bit like doing detective work of trying to figure out, you know, what happened there. You know, was one member into, you know, wanting the meeting and the other member didn't want the meeting? Was it that they really thought that it was just premature? That in looking at the legislation, they just weren't ready to have it come to fruition? I don't know.
Virginia, I have a real quick question about requesting a hearing. Is that done online, or how do you request a hearing?
You either call or email the
Oh.
chair.
Mhm.
And on the public access room website, if you go to current legislature, there's a tab that's called current legislature, and it's got all kinds of lists of, you know, all of the committees, all of the members, their email addresses, all that kind of stuff. And in there, there's a list of office managers. And that's really a nice list to have out if you're going to be making phone calls, to call and maybe ask for the office manager or the committee clerk. That'll be a list that'll be up there as soon as it's completed. And because often the members aren't available, but you can certainly talk to the committee clerk and say, you know, I'd really like to see this scheduled. Do you have any idea whether the chair has it on his radar? That kind of thing. Yeah.
I see. And does it take a certain number of people to request it, or if just one person requests it?
It can really vary. I've heard chairs say that they didn't schedule a bill because nobody asked for it.
Hmm.
You know, it seemed like a good idea, but nobody seemed to ask for it. Well, you know, you should have seen it. It was a good bill. You should have heard it. So it could be, as you know, just one person asking for it could have made a difference in that situation. There are other times where, say, the chair isn't quite sold on the idea, that may take a little bit more of a nudge from a few people.
That's good to know. Thank you for that. Kylie, on Facebook, were there any questions?
There weren't any questions on Facebook, but does anyone else have any other questions before we wrap up?
I was trying to, save the chat, and save chat wasn't an option in this chat box for some reason. At least couldn't get it to save. Is there some reason for that? I wanted to get, for instance, she had the and
It's the way they set up the chat. They've disabled the copying, so we can't copy it. You can screen grab it, maybe.
We'll send out all the links and all the contact information, so no worries about that.
yeah, it was just contact information that I wanted.
We'll
Thanks.
definitely get it out to folks. Thank
Okay.
you.
There's one question in the chat. Let's see.
Yeah, about
And-
finding bills.
Yes.
Yeah, so the easiest way to find bills is, can I go ahead and share my screen again? Let me do that. And so a couple of things. One is to sign up for those hearing notices by committee so that you find out which bills are actually moving forward. And you can use the keyword search to find bills. I could put in here, you know, monetary bail, and it would look for all of the documents that have both the word monetary and the word bail. If I wanted exactly monetary bail, I'd put it in quotation marks. The results, as you'll see here, are quite duplicative, you know, that it'll be this testimony, that testimony. So it takes a little bit of sorting through, and you'd have to click in and out of the status pages to actually see what the bills were about. In the other way, and the way that I find is a little easier to find bills, is to go to the reports and lists button down here under the recent updates. There are these 9 icons. Reports and lists is my favorite button. And it opens in deadline tracking. This is where you can find all the bills and all that kind of stuff. But down here on the left, there's subject search on the bottom. And there I could just type in, I'm going to type in monetary bail. It'll look for the exact string of characters. So I might just want to put in bail by itself. Maybe I should do that. And it's only going to look at bills that have the word bail in either their bill title, their description, or their keywords. So it's not as exhaustive as the keyword search, but it usually brings up what we want to find. And then these reports are always searchable. I just want to mention that. You can always double click and find which one has been active most recently by double clicking on the header. And then you could put them in alpha order if you wanted, and change it into a PDF and send it out, all kinds of things. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, there's a question for Faith Action in the chat.
Answer this one. Sorry, I have my camera off right now. I'm kind of managing a migraine. So I think you can rely on action alerts about the priority legislation for affordable housing if you had signed up for that one. And then for this task force, it will be for bills that our task force Transformative Justice choose to follow. So outside of that, I think you should check on your own. Does that answer your question?
Yes, pretty much. I'll talk now. I guess will Faith Action do the phone alerts for pretty much all of the instances when testimony is needed for our bill? Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually got it wrong.
It's so good to have an organization that helps you with that kind of thing. It's really nice that you can all help each other and make sure that nothing gets missed. And someone wants to know how they sign up for those phone 2 alerts.
Thanks for asking that, Terrence. We are going to share the link with you folks. So, yep, we'll share that link. And if no one else has questions, let's see. Oh, thank you, Sun. It's there. And we'll send up a follow-up email and let you know and have kind of a list of all the contact information. Yeah. Any other questions before Kylie wraps it up?
Okay, perfect. I'll just start off with a big mahalo nui to Virginia. We're so grateful for your presentation and hopefully everyone feels better informed to participate in the upcoming legislative session. We encourage you to reach out to Virginia with any further questions at par@capital.hawaii.gov and also to sign up for the Transformative Justice Task Force's phone to action alerts to be notified about actions you can take during session around bail and more. The phone to action link will be linked in the chat. Also, the ACLU of Hawaii is hosting a virtual advocacy training that will provide an opportunity to connect with other activists and learn how to be part of their efforts to promote justice and freedom across Hawaii. It will be held on Wednesday, February 2nd from 6 to 7:30 on Zoom, and the registration link will also be in the chat. And lastly, please join us, the Transformative Justice Task Force, as we navigate, advocate, and care deeply around transformative justice. Our next gathering is Wednesday, 1/19, and you can find more information about us on our Faith Action website. Mahalo nui everyone for coming, and again to Virginia for such an amazing presentation. Stay safe and have a good night. Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you.
Thank you.